Welcome to Not Work, Myth, and Storytelling. This is the show where ancestral wisdom is woven with the biggest questions of today. I'm your host and lead storyteller, Marisa Gowdy. I'm a myth worker, a story healer, a coach for writers and creative entrepreneurs. I'm the author of The Sovereignty Knot, A Woman's Way to Freedom, Power, Love, and Magic, and the founder of the Writer's Knot and Author's Knot communities. If you love what you hear and want to support the show, I'd be so grateful if you'd become a paid subscriber on Substack. Each week in my newsletter, Myth is Medicine, I'll take you on a deep dive into how mythology and folklore can help us heal the individual and the collective in this present moment and beyond. There's a link in the show notes to follow Myth is Medicine over on Substack. On Not Work, we explore the mythology and folklore of Ireland and beyond. Whether you're drawn to Celtic culture or the mysteries concealed in ancient sacred sites, or whether you just like a good story and expansive conversation, you're in the right place. Welcome, Vulture. Season 6, Episode 3, Maggie's Doll, a story of 1940s Ireland, told by Dee Mulrooney. If you have your own stories to tell this year, if you're interested in finding a close-knit community that can support you as you make your creative dreams a reality, well, I wanted to be sure that you knew that I still have 2 seats left in my online writing program, The Author's Knot. This intimate 10-month online writing program is for thought leaders, spiritual leaders, memoirists, and heart-led visionaries who are working on a book or another big project. The Author's Knot will help you to strengthen your craft, clarify your message, and truly organize your ideas so you can bring the fullness of your vision to life. I'm crafting the Author's Knot program for writers who are declaring 2025 the year that the book gets written or the big project gets completed. Applications for this program are open now. If you'd like to write and learn with other creative beings who resonate with the approach to story and connection that I've cultivated here on Not Work, then I invite you to learn more and apply. Do act soon, as space is extremely limited. You can find all the details at marisagowdy.com. Based in Berlin, Dee Mulrooney weaves a rich tapestry of experiences, emotions, and insights into her creative practice. Rooted in the complexities of inhabiting a female body, her work emerges from the profound influences of her upbringing as a working-class Irish woman in the patriarchal, misogynistic landscape of 1970s Catholic Ireland. Her background profoundly shapes her identity and informs her artistic journey, where she fluidly navigates drawing, painting, writing, performing, filmmaking, and music. At the heart of Dee's practice lies a commitment to artivism, capturing inspiration in the fleeting moments of everyday life. Whether a poem penned on a train or a song recorded in the kitchen amidst family chaos, each fragment is a vital thread in her artistic narrative. Through her alter ego, Growler, a vibrant, full-body vulva costume, she channels the voices of women of the past, transforming pain into powerful storytelling and performance. This character is a nod to her ancestors. Growler embodies the spirit of resilience, connecting generations and facilitating healing. With over 2 decades of experience as an educator, Dee champions community and empowerment, drawing inspiration from celebrated artists and the potent power of women's narratives. Her art serves as both a sanctuary and a transformative force, resonating deeply with viewers and inviting them into a shared space of healing and connection. Well, I'm so excited to welcome Dee back to the podcast. And as is our way, we begin where we do by asking, Dee, will you tell us the story?
I will indeed. This is called Maggie's Doll. Maggie lived in a small house with her mummy and her sisters. She was 7 years old and often found herself feeling a little worried, though she couldn't quite say why. She had a loving mummy, a home, and on good days, there was enough food to fill her tummy. Maggie loved school, where she was a bright, good girl. One sunny morning, there was a surprise at the door. Uncle Billy, from London, had come to visit, bringing along his friend Sean. Uncle Billy was Maggie's favourite person in the whole wide world. With his handsome smile and his beautiful suits, he often adorned with a pink handkerchief tucked neatly in his pocket, he made her heart flutter with joy. He had the kindest brown eyes that sparkled with warmth. The best part about Uncle Billy was how he'd sweep Maggie up into his arms and share thrilling tales of adventures and escapades in the big city of London. He would spin her around and make her laugh until her sides hurt. Though he often brought presents, shiny toys and nice food, Maggie didn't mind so much, because they always disappeared when he left. What truly mattered was the special time that they shared together. As they approached the little iron gate, Mrs. Long, Maggie's mammy, looked rather cross and sighed heavily. "Oh, Jesus, Mary, and Holy Saint Joseph, here comes that moth and his friend," she said. Maggie didn't quite understand what a moth was, nor did she understand why Mammy was never pleased to see Uncle Billy. He always brought treats and gifts, and so Maggie shrugged off her mother's discontent. "I don't mind what anyone says," thought Maggie, her heart racing with excitement as she dashed to greet them. Uncle Billy swung her high up into the air, making her giggle as the world spun around her. Maggie did have a daddy who drove a great big horse and carriage, all black, but she had only seen him once. He also wore a long black coat and a tall black hat. Mrs. Long said he was an undertaker, which made Maggie feel frightened and small. Mammy had once said to him, "Over my dead body will you take Maggie?" And that made Maggie feel safe behind her mother's apron when he came around. Inside the cosy little house, Uncle Billy hugged Mrs. Long, who forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He handed her a lovely straw basket, bursting with delightful treats, things Maggie had only seen when Uncle Billy came to visit. There were fancy biscuits, tea from far-off lands, marmalade, and even oranges, satin pillow sweets, which Maggie had only ever tasted at Christmas time. Then came Maggie's present. Uncle Billy handed her a grand box, decorated with bright flowers and tied with a sumptuous red satin bow. For a moment, Maggie hesitated, gazing at the beautiful wrapping, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Go on, sweetheart," coaxed Mrs. Long, a warmth dawning in her voice that was rare to hear. With the slow, trembling pull on the satiny ribbon, Maggie's excitement bubbled over. As she lifted the lid, her breath caught in her throat. Inside lay a doll so enchanting that it took away her breath. She had long, curly black hair, sparkling green eyes, and she wore a stunning red coat. Her rosy little mouth and soft, pale, round face filled Maggie with an overwhelming rush of love. At that moment, Maggie knew exactly what to name her. "I'll call her Lizzie," she declared proudly, for Lizzie was her very favourite name. Uncle Billy and Sean stayed until the shadows danced upon the walls, telling stories and sharing laughter. Maggie nibbled on shortcake until her tummy ached, and for those hours her worries faded like the sunlight into dusk. But when it was time to say goodbye, it struck her like the wind. A deep ache pressed in her chest as her heart raced and her feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. Uncle Billy smelled like flowers as she hugged him tight, clinging to him as fiercely as she could. "Don't worry, my little Maggie," he assured her with a soft squeeze. "Lizzie will look after you. She's your special doll." But as he walked away, a wave of sadness washed over her, carrying with it wishes for more food, warm coal for the fire, and a soft smile forever on her mammy's face. That night, as Maggie laid her head on her pillow, she whispered her bedtime prayers with all her heart. She prayed that when morning came, Lizzie would still be right beside her, safe in her pretty flower box. That night, Maggie dreamed sweet dreams. She dreamt that she could fly and that she was floating amongst the clouds. She saw Lizzie in her dream, but she was no longer a doll. Instead, she was a beautiful young woman. Her red coat had become a red cloak. She had a look in her eyes that Maggie recognized. Something old but familiar awoke in Maggie's heart. She felt such a love for this woman. She ran to her, and Lizzie wrapped her in her cloak and hugged her. She whispered something in Maggie's ear. She stroked her hair and cupped Maggie's small face in her gentle hands. She looked deeply with her bright green eyes into Maggie's eyes and told her that she was never alone. Lizzie told her that she knew her before she was born. She knew her in the warm, safe darkness of memory. Maggie didn't really understand what the words that Lizzie were saying meant, but she understood the love that she felt for this woman through every part of her body. She could feel and hear things she couldn't while she was awake. She could hear the steady thump of her own heart and Lizzie's heart. She could hear and feel the blood rushing through her veins and Lizzie's veins. She felt her heart melt into Lizzie's. She felt their blood mix until they became one. Maggie no longer felt her body. She was free. She was floating. She was swimming in pure love. Then she heard the words, I know you. I am always with you. I belong to you. Come morning light, Maggie woke up in a room that seemed to glow. The memory of her dream twinkled in her mind as she thought of Lizzie. Peering cautiously beside her bed, she gasped in delight. There was Lizzie, nestled perfectly in her beautiful box, just as she had left her. Maggie scooped her up, tucking her snugly beside her in bed. But when she heard Mammy's footsteps on the stairs, her heart fluttered with a pang of worry. She thought briefly of hiding Lizzie, and she thought of her going to old Mr. Hempton's stall, and that made her heart feel very heavy. With a tender kiss, she placed Lizzie back in her box just in time. Mrs. Long, Mammy, entered the room, and Maggie turned over, squeezing her eyes shut, trying to silence the sobs that threatened to rise. But then she felt something soft, the gentle weight of Lizzie settling beside her. Peeking to her side, Maggie gasped in wonder. Lizzie was there, alive and gazing at her with her sparkling green eyes. And sewn onto her coat was a small brass pin that read, I belong to Maggie. And in that moment, with Lizzie wrapped in her arms, Maggie knew that she was never alone.
Oh, and the beginning.
The
Oh,
end and the beginning, yeah.
yeah. Oh, thank you for taking us into Maggie's world, into Lizzie's world.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, there's so much under the surface of this story.
Yeah, I wanted it to read like a children's story, like one of those kind of detailed, those stories when you're a kid that you love to hear the details about the sweets and the details of the Iron Gate and strangers, not strangers coming to visit, but like loved ones coming to visit. And yeah, there's loads of layers in there, really, loads of layers.
And it gives us that chance to think too, like, of course, when we just love the lushness of stories as kids that just gave us like, oh, I could see it, I could feel the gate. And now,
Yeah.
of course, when we come to these stories as adults, we can say, well, what was the gate and who was the undertaker? And it just gives us that chance to inhabit the story, not like, tortured English majors, but like,
Yeah.
Devoted story lovers that say,
Yeah.
oh, there's so many stones to turn over and so
Yeah.
much to be revealed underneath each of them.
I'm trying to keep something without it being too weighty as well, trying to leave something to kind of ponder. And like that's a true story. That's about my mum. That's like a lot of that would be obviously except for the dream and the doll coming to life and stuff like that. But there's a lot of historical fiction in there from Ireland in the late 1940s. Um, so yeah, it does, like, it's a long time since I've read it now, and I can feel it was I started to get into it again, and I could feel the world. I could feel yeah. There's lots more detail.
These stories you would have grown up hearing from your mom? Like, did you hear this often as a kid or piece this together? Was this a story she'd tell you and like as oh, here's my doll story? Or how did you?
This is actually, so Maggie was my mother. So
Mm.
and her uncle Billy was gay, and he had a partner.
Yeah.
I changed most of the names. Yeah, so my uncle, who I never met anyway, he was gay, and he did live in London, and they used to call gay people in those days moths or hermaphrodites. That was like a terrible slang. That's what they would say. So you can imagine in Ireland in the 1940s, like, it was, firstly, it was illegal at the time, and so he lived, but he had a good life in London, and he did have a partner.
Yeah.
And of course, then my mother's mother would be mortified when he come home, because of course all the neighbours would be talking. And he did have a pink handkerchief, and he did have a a pink feather in his cap sometimes.
Mm.
So he didn't hide it, but he didn't flaunt it either, you know.
Right.
And he did also bring presents home, and they were like, my mother was raised very poor. They didn't have enough food a lot of the time.
Mhm.
So he would bring presents, and then of course the presents would be brought to the pawn shop the next day.
Mm.
So the pawn shop was owned by Mr. Hemptonstall.
Mm.
And then if there was new clothing or if there was toys, they'd be brought to the pawn shop.
Mhm.
And most likely they wouldn't be gotten back. So my mom didn't grow, she wasn't able to grow attached to things, you know.
Mm.
So that's where, yeah, the layers are there. And then Lizzie so my mother was adopted. So she wasn't actually adopted. She was basically just kept by the midwife who delivered her. Yeah, in those days it was quite common actually for people to just hold on to kids rather than them go to the mother and baby homes or to an orphanage, because they die. Infant mortality was through the roof. So the midwife who delivered my mother just held on to her. She kept her. And my mother survived. So she was left with this little girl who she raised as her own. She was an incredible mother. But she was a Victorian woman, you know, she was a woman of her time. So she could be quite stern. I didn't know her. Again, these are all just stories from my mother. So,
Yeah.
but a very, very kind woman. She was a traditional midwife, and she delivered over 300 babies in the area. And she was also like a death doula. She prepared the bodies for death. And that's the same on both sides of my family, by the way. My other grandmother was also that. And I know more about her because my dad is still alive, so he still talks about his mother.
Mm.
And so this story of Mrs. Long, you know, she would have to do anything that she could to feed her kids. So my mother was she was the seventh. She had 6 other children. And my mother, of course, was the youngest by a long shot. I think the next one to my mother was like 12. So you can imagine. And there was no social welfare. The government didn't pay for you just had to survive yourself.
Right.
And her husband had died, so from an injury from the First World War.
Mm.
He didn't die in the First World War, he died afterwards. So yeah, it was like she had to do what she could to survive. So one of the things that she did was midwifery, and she would get paid sometimes in food or other things, or fuel, coal, I imagine. So all these little details that are in there, I kind of wanted to keep them in there, you know. I want to add social folklore, history, keep those bits in there for my kids as well, so that when they can read the stories and try to decipher them, or they'll start to tell the stories again then when they hear all those bits, I think, you know.
And even as you wrote it, like it revealed itself as you went through. So it's like that the poignancy of the fact that her prayer is that Maggie would be there, or that Maggie's prayer that Lizzie
Yeah,
would be there the next day. And
yeah,
we don't understand yet why she would have such a simple
yeah.
prayer that says, and then it's that sense of like, oh, and ownership and belonging to in the most sacred sense
Mm,
becomes this story. And we know there's, God, I mean, we're in the 21st century now where ownership is so fraught and awful.
mm,
And yet belonging as you offer it to us is just it's so gorgeous and
mm,
necessary, and is not nearly, I think it's something that we take for granted now because we all have so many things, and
yeah.
yet and we're all still looking for that human connection of where we belong and who we belong with and to.
Mm. I
Yeah.
mean, we definitely have an overflow of stuff, but like a lot of people don't, you know. a lot of things that were assumed in previous generations can't be now. Like my mom could assume a home.
Yeah.
You know, like that was one thing that they got right actually in Ireland in the 1930s, was that they built social housing. So for the first time ever, working class people could had a home that they had security of tenure. They couldn't be evicted, and they weren't at the behest of landlords, you know. So there was that, which was incredible, really, when you think about it. So my mother had a secure home her whole life. She lived in the same home her whole life, which would have been a first for working class women of her generation. And that was something that she could take for granted, you know.
What a fleeting thing, right? Because certainly that's not the story anymore.
Well, it changed in one generation. I mean, we
Mhm.
assumed that we would do the same, only better, and it didn't happen.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like the housing crisis in Ireland now is the worst it's ever been, and I don't know how many thousand children are homeless and how many people have to move constantly. And it was something that we all thought was going to continue, and of course it doesn't, because that's not the way capitalism works.
Right. And for those who don't know your story, you're in Berlin in
Yeah,
large part because of the housing crisis and the way
yeah,
things are in Dublin, right?
yeah. Because we lost our home in Dublin, yeah, so we
Ah,
decided to take our chances elsewhere, and it has worked out. We've been very lucky. We have been able to secure ourselves a home, but that was with the group of people. It wasn't. We didn't do it alone, and that was what we learned, was that okay, there's other ways of doing things. We bought a house collectively.
I didn't know that part of your story.
Yeah, so we bought a house and some land collectively,
Mhm.
with other artists, and we're building a kind of a community. Yeah, yeah, we're starting a
Oh,
cult. Marisa, are you coming?
I am. I am, absolutely. 2025, it's the year, my love. It's the
Yeah.
year.
So yeah, so we didn't we just couldn't afford to get a home by ourselves, so we did
Yeah.
it collectively. So there's six of us.
Ah,
And yeah, I mean, there are facilities in Germany, though. It's great because they're kind of set up legally to be able to do stuff like that here, you know.
okay.
Like, it's anathema in Ireland. People in Ireland are like, you did what? Because like Ireland just doesn't have that legal structure. It's very hard
Yep.
to do things collectively there.
Mhm.
And that's also got to do with housing and ancestral trauma and on Gorta Moor and evictions. And we hold it so strongly in our cellular memory in Ireland.
Yeah.
Security of tenures. That's why people are obsessed with owning their own homes, because we remember in ourselves what it's like. And part of my story, without repeating myself from the last podcast, was to understand the story of the migrant, I think, and the diaspora, the Irish diaspora, to understand that piece,
Mhm.
to understand that grief, and to really deeply feel it in an embodied way. It wasn't something that I ever asked for, but I understand that so well now. You know, I get it.
And I don't think we can ever overstate it, especially on this podcast, because I'm producing all of this as a, several times removed daughter of the
Yeah,
diaspora too. So
yeah,
it's a refrain for us. It's
yeah,
part of the weave of what this whole show is that sense of it's the call and response, it's the yearning and the leaving and the returning and the all of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, you know what the diaspora holds, because often when people leave, they hold. It's almost like time stands still in some ways from the
Mhm.
country that you've left. So
Right.
you're taking what was there when you left. So it's also a form of preservation, I think, which I think is really important. You know, like the diaspora preserve culture and tradition and heritage. Sometimes a lot more than the people still living in the place that they came from.
I'm just hearing about, was it Newfoundland and how many old stories or old songs in particular
Yeah,
are still in Newfoundland. And then folks head over from Ireland to bring them back because they were
that's right.
so well preserved from the
That's right.
19th century.
That's
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
story and myth and lots of other things, because, and you know, you can, it comes from a yearning to stay connected and to stay rooted. And I think you can do both. So I think you can stay rooted and connected to more than one place, and you can also grow and connect with another place.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, Nostalgia and melancholy and all of those things are hard things to carry, you know. So it's a good reminder. I have to remind myself often and frequently, like, that I left Ireland for a reason, and those reasons
Mhm.
are still there.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
And when I go back, I'm reminded, and I'm like, oh yeah, right, okay, you know. Because we get very misty eyed about something that actually never really existed either. It's a romantic view often that we have.
Yes. And that's where, I think and there's such magic in that, as long as we can come back and ground it, and
Yeah,
that remembering of saying, oh, right, I have a nostalgia for a thing that never was,
yeah,
or, that in and of itself was always, whether it's a Celtic twilight dream or some sort of,
yeah,
misty thing we were offered. But it occurs to me too, like modernity is fucking hard beyond, right?
yeah,
But the one way to do it well, I mean, we have to be able to do it well to survive,
yeah,
is especially to be able to say, right, my heart is of one place or my stories are of one place, but my feet and my daily
mhm,
life are in another. And
yeah,
that's just a function of modern life for so many of us in our great
yeah,
big scattered globe. And of course, the blessings of modernity is you and I are sitting down and having this chat and have the connections that we do
yeah.
because of the yearning, because of all the strange, beautiful, horrible, wonderfulness of the modern world.
And that's okay that we can't, that our heart is in one place and our feet are
Mm,
in another,
mm.
because not all of our heart is in one place. But it's also that thing of, as well, homesickness maybe isn't something that can ever be fixed, but you can totally live with it. I mean, people live without limbs. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You're not lamenting your limb the whole time. You get on with it. So
Right.
we carry this, our whole story within us. We're obsessed, I think, in modernity. I don't know what other way to say it, with perfection.
Hmm. Hmm.
We're terrified when people tell us that they're not happy or that they're homesick.
Hmm.
It's like, it's so taboo.
Fix
It's
it.
still, yeah, and it still is. But what are you going to do about it? I'm going to carry it. I'm going to carry my homesickness,
Right.
and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to make art about it,
Yes.
but it's like when you have a chronic illness or something like that. It's like we're expecting perfection, and I don't think that I've no interest in perfection. I don't know anymore what way we're meant to be, but I have zero interest in any form of perfection. And I'm really just, appreciative that I'm still alive at the end of the day, spinning on this little blue dot. I mean, here we are. So, and absolutely grateful for the voice that I have too, for because so many people relate to this homesickness, and they love when you can give voice to that. Say, oh yeah, I feel like that too, and oh, somebody else does. I'm not alone in my feelings around that, and there's great solace in that. There's great community in that.
Knowing that your work certainly doesn't just resonate with diaspora, it resonates with the people at home, because I think it's possible to feel the homesickness even when you're still there, right?
Yeah,
Because it becomes even more. I mean, yes, we have the land especially
yeah,
when we're on it, but like homesickness and that whole identity piece and that longing
mm.
for the something it's abstract in so many ways.
The belonging, like you were saying, the belonging.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, yeah,
Yeah. So I want to take us back to the story for a minute and take us to Lizzie's transformation. And I'm leaping here, but my brain
yeah.
just went here.
Okay,
So I'm going to follow
yeah.
it. Lizzie's transformation from wearing the red coat to wearing the red cloak.
It's funny because today is Nollaig Naman, and I just posted a picture that I did for my mother-in-law who's from Galway. She was 75, and I was like, I can't give her one of my weird vagina paintings because it's not really her bag. But I did want to give her something personal, because, like, what do you give somebody who's 75 who has a house and everything that she needs? So she's from Galway, and the traditional Galway shawl. I don't know if you've seen those old photographs, but they're just like, they just take my breath away. Anyway, it turns out that that photograph, of course, was staged, and that the woman didn't even really want to put on her traditional gear because she didn't wear it anymore, and she was a modern woman in 1913. So,
Mm.
here we are looking back and going, sure, they weren't wearing that stage, and these are the stories we tell, the stories we weave. Anyway, the photographs are stunning; they're really beautiful, and I'm so glad that we have them. So it was inspired by one of those photographs, and yeah, so I posted that today, and it's like I didn't even think I didn't think that I was going to post that picture today. But then this morning I was like, oh yeah, and I'm having a few friends over later for the Nollaig Naman, and I had used that to invite them. So I was like, oh
Oh,
sure, I'll post it.
yeah.
And then it was like red cloak, and then we had said that I might tell a story and I mightn't. So then I was reading through Maggie's doll, and I completely forgotten about the red cloak. And then you mentioned Bridget's Day, and so that's my omen for the last day of Christmas. But Elizabeth was the name of my biological grandmother, who died when my mother was only 5 weeks old. So I wrote that story around the time that my mum was really deep in her dementia. really, really deep. And she was just calling for her mother the whole time. And so my mother obviously had two mothers. She had Mrs. Long, who was the woman who adopted, and she called her Mrs. Long. She used to say me mammy, but she'd also intertwine Mrs. Long. She'd also say Mrs. Long. So there was a certain, she knew that Mrs. Long wasn't her biological mother. So she would switch between me mammy and Mrs. Long. And then she'd say me real mammy, which was Elizabeth Forrester. And so I was like, as my mum was getting deeper into the dementia, at one point she just kept saying, I want to go home. I want me mammy. And it was quite easy to get her out of it with like a song or just get her up to dance or just to chat or whatever. But sometimes I'd say, which mammy are you looking for?
Yeah.
You know, and she'd say, I want me real mammy. And I remember one night we used to sleep together a lot. And even when she had the dementia, I'd hop into bed beside her. And she said to me one night, do you think my mammy loved me? And I said, which mammy? And she said, me real mammy. And I said, do you love me? And she was like, yeah. And I said, of course she loved you. Because she only knew her for such a short time, you know, for 5 weeks. So this was my mother's whole mother wound. It was massive, Marisa. I can't even tell you. It was everything about her identity. She was so devastated and heartbroken that she lost her mother at 5 weeks. And she was so obsessed with knowing, did she love her? You know, and she used to, she asked similar questions before she had dementia, but it became an obsession then. So I started to tap into, you know, my mom's early childhood stories when she had the dementia, because that's where she'd go back to. You know, a lot of people with dementia do that. They go back to their early memories. I want to go home. I want to go home. And it would often be back to that house that's in the story. So I was trying to imagine, like, I was calling on my grandmother. I had really bad endometriosis as well at the time. So I had a lot of womb stuff going on. So I was doing a lot of womb healing. And I was trying to call on my grandmother and go, look, you know, make her feel like you're around, or just connect with her, connect with Maggie, you know, she needs you. Like, or also I was praying for her to take her when it got so bad. I was like praying to everybody, praying for her death. It was so horrific what she was going through. Everybody in their own time. But I have to say, there's a lot to be said for how the medical industry as well works at the end of life. It's just, I'm not sure about it. Like we tend to keep people alive, but you know, through any means possible. For what? Like to watch what my mother went through towards the end was just, it gets bad and then it gets worse, and then you just can't believe how bad it gets, that a person will stay alive under those conditions, you know. So she was in a lot of emotional pain. But I haven't actually really spoken about this before in public, but it feels okay. It feels good because I know so many people are going through the same thing. So that's why the story kind of came through in that way. I was trying to, what would you say, like bring myth to life or something, mythology, create my own mythology, my own family mythology with this work, with this kind of work with my womb and my grandmother, and trying to heal the endometriosis, because I know it's all ancestral, and also just to help my mother. So that's where that piece came through, and it just came through really easily that Lizzie turned into the doll turned into her mother. So that was her mother coming to her. And that's why it gets a bit weird with the blood mixing and so on. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not really a child's story. Like, anyway, I kind of like those stories that are a little bit like old fairy tales. They're a bit weird, you know.
Right.
And then they chopped off the child's finger, you know. I don't shy away from that either when I'm telling stories to the kids in school. You know, I'll often tell stories that have death in them, or battles, or sadness or loss and stuff like that. Kids love it. They're like, will somebody die? Like, maybe, I don't know. I tell all the Celtic myths to the kids, you know, and they're like, yeah, does she die?
She goes to the other world, my child. She goes to the other world. No, she dies.
Yeah. Will there be battles? So I wanted to just somehow unite my mother with her mother in the dreamscape.
Yes.
So that's one of a trilogy, that story. So it's Maggie's doll, and then there's First Cry, and then The Last Breath. And the First Cry then is about Mrs. Long being a birth attendant, being a midwife, because she used to bring my mother with her. Because when she was so small, she didn't want to leave her in the middle of the night. So she'd wrap her up in a blanket and she'd take her. My mum remembered being at the end of the bed, at the end of the birthing bed, and she'd be fast asleep, and then she'd wake up to the cries of a baby. Or sometimes she'd be left downstairs in the parlour in front of the fire while Mrs. Long was upstairs.
Right.
But she didn't want to leave my mum on her own,
Right.
because
Oh.
a lot of her kids had grown up and married at that stage. So
Ah.
yeah, so there's all that real stuff is in there, along with myth and imagination and other worlds, and so that's why that part was just trying to bring my grandmother to my mother, I suppose. Yeah,
Mm.
through
Oh,
the dreamscape.
wow. Well, thank you for bringing us your mother and her story and your grandmother's stories too. I mean, the way in which you spoke around that Mrs. Long was both death doula and midwife, and then not knowing that's on both sides of your family, and knowing that in your way you have so amazingly embodied that energy. Your art is so much around this
Mm.
birth and death and the mystery in the middle and the mystery on the other side. And I'm just now seeing your mom at the foot of another birthing woman in the moment of childbirth. I just feel like I just need to sit with that image and just say, and like, and that creates a gorgeous woman like your mother who creates you, that creates this
Yeah,
visionary connection. Like, of course, because so much of your art has that sort of, for lack of a better term, the Russian doll idea sometimes, where I feel like there's that woman within a woman within a woman, I feel like is
yeah.
part of your
Never
work, and it's
thought
so
about that.
there.
That's so true. Okay, next drawing. Russian doll. But so much of it as well, Marisa, was so sad. Like so many of these stories, like women were giving birth and some of them were having 20 kids,
Yeah.
Like it was just unbelievable. I cannot get over the strength of these men. Nullig Naman, like seriously, what a day to be, if there was ever a day deserved, it's for the women of Ireland, who were birthing population for fucking De Valera and the new state, it's like what I mean, what they went through, along with all of the abuse and the subjugation and the oppression and the mother and baby homes, and like so
Mhm.
my mother grew up in that, like very, very solidly in that.
Yeah.
And her mother, Mrs. Long, like was attending women who maybe a lot of the time didn't want to have those babies, helping them in that time. Can you imagine? Maybe they didn't want to have 18 babies, you know? Like my mom said to one particular woman, I can't remember her name now. I should have recorded some of these things, but maybe not, because I don't know how the families would feel. But there was one particular woman who was always having babies, and my mom said she was on about her 11th at this stage. And this is a bit of a hard story now, but when the women were in labour, Mrs. Long had her busy life or whatever. So she'd say to me, Ma'am, go down and ask Mrs. Such a Body, how's her leg? So she didn't tell my mother what was going on. She didn't say I'm a midwife, and there was lots of the pieces were myth. That's why that story is written like that, because things like that weren't explained to children back then. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if they were a part of it.
Mm.
So she'd say, go down and ask Mrs. Such a Body, how's her leg? And ask her, does she need me to come and have a look at it now? Or is she all right for another while? Meaning, how far gone is she in her labour?
Right. Right.
So my mum would go and knock on the door and say, my mummy wants to know, how's your leg? And do you want. And then she'd say to me, Mum, for this particular poor woman, like, and don't go into that house if he has no shoes on him. So this particular man was abusing his daughters. And men in those days would never take their shoes off. Not in an Irish house, only if they were going to be in bed.
Right.
So to protect my mother, she would say, don't go into that house if he has his shoes off. Because that was code for, okay, he's in the middle of abusing his kids. Like,
Code, and yet also an incredibly clear
yeah,
symbol of what exactly was happening. Oh
yeah,
my word.
yeah. And yet
Oh.
she still attended this woman. Of course she did, because she was a woman and she had compassion for this woman. And so things like that, little pieces of the puzzle there. And my mom said, yeah, like she didn't really know what she didn't know. She knew that there was a baby in the morning, but she didn't know how it got there. It was and it was kind of like, how kids, they only ask questions when they're ready to ask questions. You can really keep a lot from kids, you
Mhm.
know.
Yep.
You really can. You know that amazing film about the death camps, what's it called? Life is Beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
Like kids will only, a lot of the time, they'll only want to see what they're ready to see.
Right.
You can really manage a child's space quite well, I think, if you're aware of that.
Yeah.
So my mum obviously it kind of just went over her head. And then as she got older, and she wouldn't go with Mrs. Long then because she was older and she was able to stay at home on her own. She knew then that that's what her mammy was doing. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the phrase that kind of comes to mind as you describe this is such a culture of concealment. And that
Yes.
it's both, I mean, and it's such secret keeping and like this need for code breaking, or
Yeah.
when you're a child and someone's kind enough, like Mrs. Long was, to mediate her daughter's reality, there was no reason to have to offer any more information than
Yeah.
Maggie was asking for at any given moment. And that was a gift in and of itself, and also enabled Mrs. Long to keep getting her work done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
much managing
Yeah.
of spaces and places and people's stories on top of obviously just this basic need for survival every day.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It was
Oh,
totally survival. It was
yeah.
totally survival. I mean, my mum talks about that. She talked about that a lot. Like I got the feeling that it was, yeah, it really was survival. You know, she often went to bed hungry. I was often sent to bed in the middle of the day to conserve her energy while the kids were still playing outside, you know, and
Wow.
burnt the what you call it, the surrounds of the doorways because they didn't have any firewood, you know. So it was hardcore, you know.
And if they
Yeah.
didn't have an Uncle Billy, I mean, he was probably their saving grace up and down so many times.
And he probably, I don't know how often he visited. She talked about him a lot. That wasn't his real name, but she talked about how kind he was and how much she loved him, you know. But also, you know, a lot of the old fashionedness of her mother came through, and like that thing of concealment as well. Like, you know, all the mother and baby homes, they were there in plain sight.
Yeah.
There in plain sight. Like Cillian Murphy just made a film about that book. Do you know the book? What was it called?
I just read the book. I haven't seen the film yet. It's such a.
We have to say the name of the book because it's such a good book. What's it called again? Small Things Like These.
Small Things Like These. That's right.
Yeah. Maybe we can put the name of the author in at the end. But I haven't seen the film. I read the book in a night and I was like, this is so much of the stories that my mother told me and knew about. And again, those questions of me constantly asking, but why didn't you do something about it? And it's like it's drip by drip, or it was incremental information, or it was concealment, or it was just like, don't say anything because you might be next, or I don't. It's just so layered, especially for the women. I don't blame the women, of course, but
Right.
society that created that.
Yeah. And the nature of that story too really it's that sense of everyone is so interwoven, and that if you tugged too much on one particular string, you'd feel it, 7 tugs along, it would end up, like Cillian Murphy's character couldn't say anything because of a fear of livelihood. I don't think that gives too much away, right? Like it's in a culture of survival, though you want to think collectively, and the collective is always there. And I don't know how much this has actually changed in our mindset 100 years later. But, or, 70 years later, then it feels too frightening to tug one string because you're afraid there'll be ramifications from the other side.
But that thing as well, Marisa, there that you said of like, I don't know if anything has changed. I really don't think so. Right. Not if you look at the way the world is now. And it really makes me despair, or else it just makes me a bit more wise to kind of like, look, I thought we could change the world, you know. And I'm just, I don't know. That's why when I look back now, I remember being outraged, you know, when I was a teenager, finding out about this, and often being outraged with my mom, like having why didn't you say anything? What you knew women who were in there, what, you know, and her trying to, in a limited way, trying to just say, like, it wasn't that it didn't occur to them. It was just, she just didn't have an answer as to why they didn't say anything. And like, I think a lot of people these days probably don't have an answer as to why they're not standing up against genocide, against everything that's going on, against climate change, against racism, classism, you know, homophobia, everything. Like, what we tend, most people tend not to. Most people tend to, and I'm trying to have compassion for the fact that it's just very, very hard to be human. And whether I like it or not, most people are just doing their best, Marisa. And it's just not good enough, but that's what it is.
1,000%. Right.
Here we are again on this tiny little blue dot. What it has made me, though, the past year particularly, has made me more aware of how actually hard it is to change things, and to be more focused on the immediate surroundings, because that's what you can actually have impact on. and more and more and more around young people to be present and to be a strong adult in their lives, to try your best to be a strong adult. Like, I get the absolute privilege to be a teacher, you know. I've been doing it for 25 years now, and there was a time where I was thinking, oh yeah, full-time art, I'd love to get into that and whatever, but you can't eat art, and it's nearly impossible to economize art, and I'm lucky that I don't have to do that. But more and more as time goes on, in these pretty dark days, I'm like, this is where I need to be. I need to be in the classroom. I need to be here, a solid adult in these kids' lives. They have their parents, of course, and they have other adults, but I'm one of those adults, and it's a very important place to be, is in the classroom.
Yes.
Solid, stable, happy to be there, wanting to be there, wanting to be present, and giving them a little bit of a secure boundary to kind of go, I'm here and I'm present in your life. And right now I'm not scared. And we're going to do this art. And we're going to listen to this song, and we're good. And we're in a safe city. Look out that window. We're safe. We're good. Because they feel terrified.
Do they come to you with that sort of energy, and really, that can you see it in them? Are they naming it?
100%. Like, it's so different to how it was even 20 years ago. We don't even know it. Like, our kids are so aware. They're so deeply aware of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And they're really scared. They're really, really scared. The top fear, obviously, is a parent dying, but the next one is climate change and war.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, climate change is definitely because I talk to the kids a lot about these things, and that is definitely their top one. And I don't know if that's because there's more the school that I'm in, or because of Berlin is Berlin more climate conscious? I didn't think it was, but maybe Europe is a little bit more than the States. Yeah. That's the story, isn't it? It takes you everywhere.
It does. So are there any last pieces of it that you want to kind of bring, to our conversation before we say farewell? Are there any sort of last messages the story wants you to share?
I think this last year I've been brought deeper into story, but I've gotten to know so many storytellers, and I've got to spend time with so many storytellers over the past 9 years. In this past year, my love for story has deepened immensely. Like, it really, really has. And I feel like it's, the Celts were orals. That's how we kept our history. That's how we kept things alive. And it's as important now as it ever was, I think, to keep telling our stories and holding on to, because everything else just goes. Stories somehow they keep going. Like, when you think about somebody dies, they're gone within a couple of generations, but a lot of the time the story lasts. Like Mrs. Long, nobody's thinking about Mrs. Long anymore, but she's alive in the story.
And she's just traveled around the world, and
Yeah.
that thought of her bringing another woman's baby, her now daughter, with her to yet another birth, and the thought of lying a child at the end of a birthing bed. Like, who's going to hear this story and not remember that image? Like, Mrs. Long, welcome to immortality. And I don't mean to, tout the horn of not work storytelling in this. It's just to say, this is what happens when we tell a story, and where will it go?
Yeah.
What will it plant?
And, may the goddess on this special day, Nulligan, bless your work as well, Marisa. It's so important. Richie said to me there, he said, who are you talking to? And I was telling him, and he's going, that's amazing. And he said to me, women are amazing. I said, yeah, I know. Like, you just thought it was amazing that I'm here talking to you, and, you've got your Irish ancestry, and we're all the richer for having moved around as well, despite all the things and our own histories with, what happened to people all over the world. Everything is connected, and the only way forward is together. I am 1,000% convinced.
Yes, of both preserving the distinct flavors and cultures and places from which we come, and then just constantly just celebrating and understanding, like, we're in the mix. We're in this ability for us to all communicate is not for us to be billions of individual strands. It's to create something new and generative and hopeful together, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like we're at a point now where, despite the horrors of what's going on, there is an awareness of what has happened. There is an awareness of all the genocides that have happened, and it's in the zeitgeist of how we're talking about it and how we're going to move forward now.
Yeah.
From the things that have, not the current ones, unfortunately, but what happened on Turtle Island, what happened in so-called Australia, in New Zealand, all these places, like, and it's people like yourself as well that are not afraid to shy away from those conversations.
Yeah.
And honor the indigenous threads on the land that you're on. Do you know?
And so much of it, so, and it all goes back and forth. Like, oftentimes I would speak to someone here at home in North America and say Turtle Island, and they'd say, "What?"
Yeah,
Like, that's not a concept that all that many folks in this part of the world even have.
yeah,
And it's been this sort of gift of hanging out with you lot over the last few
yeah,
years that it's become like, of course, I had a concept of that phrase, but in
yeah,
terms of making it something that can come alive, that
yeah,
then I can use fluently in my work, it just enables that sense of when we can look from 3 or 4,000 miles away, you get to see a world through a different lens. You see yourself in a different way, and then you can tell the story from a slightly different
yeah.
perspective. And again, as you're saying, we all grow from it and that ability to connect and shift the story.
I think obviously atonement has to happen, and there has to be really hard conversations have to be had, and we have to take leadership from the people who have been oppressed always first. But we also have to acknowledge, like, in your female line, like, you've no idea what the women went through in your family to get where you are now, and also so I often think about that as well. The women, like, and like a lot of the time it was forced stuff, around women, particularly in Australia and stuff like that, where a lot of the Irish women were sent over there to breed. They were sent over there with a suitcase and a pair of shoes, and didn't know where they were going. So we do have to, I absolutely believe we have to atone. There has to be restitution, restoration, restorative healing, all of that, 100%. But also not to alienate ourselves either, or other people, through language, not to ever become exclusive, because we're learning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I didn't feel comfortable using the term Turtle Island until I met an Indigenous person
Mm.
who was like, no, it's okay for you to use it. So
Yeah.
I took guidance on that. Because
Right.
I'm not, I don't want to be seen as a white woke asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not that I don't want to be seen that way, but I don't want to be that. I'm trying my best here, and I'm
Mhm.
absolutely going to make mistakes, and that's totally fine.
Mm. Mhm.
So, and I don't have it all. I don't have all the language, and it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm always in trouble because I'm always saying something that I shouldn't say. But I'm not going to stop speaking from the heart, even if it is a mistake. And we can't. I think we do have to be a little bit careful, though, that we don't shut conversations down because people don't know what to say. We have to just
Yes.
get stuck in there. It's going to be fucking messy. That's all right. That people are going to make mistakes and they're going to say things. We're all institutionally racist. If you're white, you're institutionally racist. End of story. Just get over yourself,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and accept it. Accept that that's a part of it and move from that place. We don't need to be defensive anymore. But I tell you what, Marisa, and like I do this now with my work with Growler, my alter ego, and I really believe this, and this came through very strongly one day. Like, there's not one person alive on this planet at the moment that can claim clean ancestry. Not one person. It doesn't matter where you're from. Not one person, because we all come from the same place.
Yep.
And the rocks remember. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not why we're here. We're here to stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, all the ones that made the mistakes, because we embodied the change. We are the next step. We are learning from their mistakes. We all had genocidal maniacs in our ancestry. You think the Celts weren't genocidal? They were lulas. Sure, they had sex slaves. Their economy was built on slavery and
Yep.
cows, and they had sex slaves. So, when people get all misty-eyed about the Celts, or even, Grania Whale or Queen Maeve, sure, a lot of them were completely murderous. They were warriors, fair play to them, and they defended their land, and they were fantastic women, and they're absolute heroes of mine. But let's not, like, make a hagiography of our ancestry either. Like, none of us can say, oh, well, now my ancestors.
Mhm.
So that's what I'd say, is that not one of us can claim clean ancestry.
Oh, what a gorgeous place to land this. Because what is it? We're often kind of taught when we're going into meditation is to call on the healed and well ancestors. I forget what exactly that set phrase is, which is gorgeous and welcoming
Yeah.
at a certain place, but it's also I love that you give us, like, we spoke at the beginning, like, what's underneath all the stones of this story? You know, what's
Mm,
in the underworld here? What can we learn from the shadow and the darkness that
yeah,
says, where are we healing from, rather than just going back to the folks who all seem like they had it all figured out because they're the
yeah,
shining ones?
yeah,
What do the dark ones have to
yeah,
teach us?
yeah. And they have a very interesting perspective, I think.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about that. I was thinking, wow, like we have no idea what people go through, what land has been through, the stories and the layers. But just by being fully present, that's enough in itself. A
Yes.
gentle, a gentle curiosity, I think, about why we're here, and to be present where we are is like it's such a gift in our own lives if we can do that as well. Now I wish I could do that myself. I mean, I'm here now present with you, but you know yourself, you go off into your worries, then you're like it lasts for about 10 minutes. But I really felt that I haven't quite figured out what it is yet.
Which you could see more clearly because you're not burdened by the guilt or whatever it is that may come
Yeah.
down a lineage, right? There's no, it
It's
wasn't your
not the shit
trauma.
it's not the shit on my shoe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you could kind of say, all right, hey, maybe we take off the shoe, throw it in the fire. It would be
Yeah.
there's less attachment in that way. And we can be curious as humans with our shared ancestors that are
Yeah.
the stones themselves.
Yeah. 100% less attachment. That's what I felt actually.
Yeah.
That's what curiosity there. It wasn't my stuff.
Mm.
So that's why I think like we call on different ancestors for different things.
Yeah. Yeah. And they call on us for different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Dee. I mean, we could go on for days, but I
Yeah.
think this is the most, to go from that heart deep, such beautifully specific story to really talking about the curiosity about the all seems like the perfect arc for this conversation. So thank you so much for sharing it with us, sharing this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to Not Work, Myth, and Storytelling. Please subscribe and review the show on your favorite podcast platform, and do share this episode with other lovers of mythology and story. By the way, everyone is a lover of mythology and story, even if they've forgotten. Creating this show is a labor of love, and your support will help me continue to craft and share stories throughout this season and beyond. Please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my newsletter, Myth is Medicine, over on Substack, where you'll find new writing and conversations each week. You can find out more about my writing, my book, our online writing communities, as well as how to work with me as a writing coach at marisagowdy.com. Gratefully, I live, write, work, and record this podcast on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape tribe, whose name means original people. Music on this show is performed by Beth Sweeney and Billy Hardy.